Okay. Hello, everybody. So let's get started. I'm gonna see how to control this here. Perfect. So for those that don't know me, so my name is Juan David. I'm one of the co-founders of Keyrock. Typically, my presentations are a lot more into the mathematics, the numbers, what's happening in the industry. Today, I was asked to talk a little bit about a combination on how we interact into DeFi and how regulation impacts what we do. I can see from the attendance that this is definitely a topic that is less interesting in general, but don't worry, I'll try to make it fun. So just to start with basics, so Keyrock, so we are an algorithmic trading firm, around 160 people. We have a multitude of different services and like desks where we trade, we do market making, we do options, and we have an OTC desk. And throughout the work of doing all of that, we started to realize that if we really wanted to embrace DeFi, we would have to start thinking about this in a complete different way. The reality of it is that even for crypto native companies that started in this industry, it is not straightforward to understand how to interact and overcome the challenges that come with smart contract interactions, both because of the security, but also the regulation. So the idea for today is I'll give you guys a little bit of an explanation on how a power user of DeFi behaves and what are the challenges and the learnings that we've gotten from doing that. So first of all, what does it mean to be a power user? So in our case, again, we're not developing the smart contracts, but we go and we look at everything that is happening in the industry. So we look at, okay, what is exciting? What's happening around? And then we go and we look at, okay, how can we invest into the main trends that are happening in the industry? And then from there, we figured out, okay, if we're going to invest in it, what type of automated system could we build that would enable us to be the most important participant of that smart contract? And throughout the journey of doing this, we started to develop a lot of funny things. So we went from interacting with GameFi and playing some games, building NFT market making, to discovering how to build market making strategies on Uniswap v3 by managing ranges and playing with decentralized perpetual protocols, but as well interacting with DeFi native DAOs and becoming a governance participant. So we just try to test and iterate. And as the company kept on growing, we started to realize that all of these learnings have to then be incorporated into the business, correct? Like the whole point of this is that at some point, people in the industry have to integrate DeFi into the day-to-day as part of their business model. Today, we're still not there, and I think very few companies are there, unless they are a protocol developer. But the reality of it is that even though it seems like that is not yet the right time, the message here is that it's the right time to experiment and learn, because what we've discovered through doing this is that the amount of innovation that is coming to the industry is tremendous. So how do we see this at the moment? So basically, what we realize is that there is already a layer in DeFi that would enable a new category of users to see value from it, correct? So we have everything that is money markets. And basically, money market was what pushed DeFi at the very beginning, correct? We have a market where people can do lending and borrowing, and then this becomes a place where people can come and interact in a trustless manner, correct? So the typical examples here will be Aave and so on. Then we have now everything that is financial infrastructure, so AMMs, but now also financial infrastructure that replicates what happens in the traditional finance sector. So we have, for example, protocols for how to do OTC on chain, where many different desks can agree on the same way of trading and then settling everything on chain in an automated way, which is very interesting. So programmability brought to the way that firms interact with each other. We have an enormous amount of innovation in derivatives. And I mean, for those of you that have already been following, this is plus or minus evident, but it is exploding at the moment. There are around 15 to 20 different protocols building options primitives. There are around 15 or 20 protocols building perpetuals primitives, interest rate swaps, everything. And it's not anymore a question of when this happens, but all of these protocols are functional. and they work, and we test them all. And the reality of it is that it's very exciting when you actually see that they do work. And already today, it's possible to build a business that only manages risk by hedging with decentralized derivatives, options, swaps, perpetuals, futures, you name it. But now there is another new pillar, which is what we internally call real-world yield. This is the idea that additional to all the innovation that we had in the industry, now we have products that are creating yield elsewhere and paying that yield through tokenization. One of the biggest examples here is a company like Credix or Goldfish, which they tokenize assets that generate income in the real world, and they just distribute that income. As such, it's a source of revenue that enters into DeFi, and a new type of user engages into the mechanism of DeFi to be able to get that yield. As such, we think that we're in a moment where all the fundamental basis for DeFi are already there, correct? Like compared to 3 years ago where a lot of these things were theoretical, we believe actually we are there. Like everything that is needed exists to be able to build good DeFi trading systems. Now, on the other hand, from a regulatory perspective, a lot of things have also moved in parallel, making and giving a lot more regulatory clarity. So for those of you that are not following so much the regulatory space, a good summary of this is plus or minus the idea that for the first time, we do have regulators that have issued full guidelines on how they want to regulate mainly the service providers of the digital asset industry. We have here 4 different types, what's called MiCA in the EU, FSM Bill, and in the US, which has not passed yet, correct, it's still in construction, the Digital Asset Commodity Act, and the Crypto Exchange Law in Hong Kong. Now, what is interesting of all of them is that they give guidelines on how should we treat exchanges, how governance should be done at digital asset companies, how stable coins should report their capital. But what they do not talk about is they don't talk about how should we deal with decentralized autonomous organizations. They don't talk about what do we do with the fact that there is no KYC on DeFi. They don't talk about how do we treat NFTs. So of course it's a good step, but when it comes down to just interacting with smart contracts, the reality is that the uncertainty is still there. There is more clarity in terms of building and creating services that use digital assets, but not on protocols that enable the use of the digital assets. What this means is that even after this round of regulation, which is coming and is now entering into force, the reality of it is that everybody that is here that is building a smart contract would still have unclarity on what to do. And every time they want to do business with someone, that someone would not know exactly if they are allowed to work with them or not. So, how do we do this? Actually pretty simple. So we have a model which we've been following internally and we recommend everybody to do. The idea is rather simple. Market-based standards, follow those standards, do KYC on every counterparty that you interact with and trade with. Yeah. A risk-based approach, understanding the risks that comes into interacting with any system in the industry, the smart contract risk, whatever it is. And more interesting, the concept of an internal risk appetite model. So an internal risk appetite model, and this is what just gonna explain now, is this very basic idea that for us to be able to engage with the innovation of this industry, at your firm, at your company, if you're a treasury manager, whatever you're doing, the answer cannot be, yes, we interact with DeFi, or no, we don't. If we don't have a way to understand that unclarity is just unclarity, but we cannot be paralyzed by it, we'll not be able to learn and innovate as much as we need to. So what we do, and this is an example, okay, this is not exactly how we do it, of course, I'm not gonna be presenting our own internal processes, but the idea here is very simple. You try to, according to what your own company does, make a list of all of the hard questions that need to be answered. Can we work with a team of unknown people? Can we onboard a DAO? Can we trade and exchange fiat against someone that doesn't have KYC? Can we launch a new product or service even though we don't know it's legal in the jurisdiction where we're launching it? These are hard questions. Now, once you ask those questions, then the next question is, what is my appetite to those questions as a company? For some things, you don't want to take any risk. You're going to say, my appetite for that's very low. For other things, maybe we can take some risk. And for other things, you can take more risk. Once you define that, then the model starts to become very simple. it starts to become, okay, what are the target that we want to have for this? If something has a very low appetite, then the target's 0, correct? You don't want to have exposure to, I don't know, teams with anonymous founders. You decide, I'm not going to interact in any smart contract that has that characteristic. But I could still allow for a certain percentage that I allow my team to do. Now, we are 160 people. So why do we do this? And it's because when you have a very small team, it's very hard to not be paralyzed. But when you have a very large team, innovation could die if you don't realize that you need to give guidelines to everybody in the company on how to navigate across the unclarity and what are the limits of what you can do even though you don't have a yes or a no. So that's pretty much the message for today. We've basically been interacting in DeFi now for a while. And the idea here is quite simple. You know, like if you are looking for a power user of DeFi, get in touch. We develop and deploy smart contract-based strategies all day around. We're a market maker, algorithmic trading firm, and good luck with your own challenges. Thank you very much. Oh yeah, questions, yeah, sure. I don't know.
Does anybody have a question, sorry? No? Nobody questions? You can dive into some topics if you want. You have until 10, so if you miss one topic, I don't know.
You see, this is what happens when you talk about regulation. It's always very hard, you know. I don't know. If somebody wants to throw a more mathematical topic, I will be happy to take it. But I don't know. Is anybody developing an interesting protocol? No? Nobody? That would be surprising. What are you doing?
Oh, sorry.
Hey, it's not about my own protocol. It's more a question on the regulatory side.
Go for it.
What jurisdictions are you seeing that are more favorable to crypto, in particular for establishing like a DeFi project? So if you can rank maybe like the top 3 and then why, and then maybe the bottom 3 if you're so willing to say which ones are not that great.
No, I mean, it's very hard. I mean, I think the first part is what do you mean with beneficiaries? I mean, do you think clarity is beneficial to you, or you want to have purpose on clarity, correct? Because the thing is that like clarity provides you a framework, but that framework might be very expensive to run. So if you're a very small startup, it might not be the smartest thing for you to initially start on a place where the framework would basically create a massive overhead over you, especially when you consider that all your competitors might not be doing that. And that's a little bit of the main issue that we have in the industry, which is that we as an algorithmic trading firm, we've always taken a stand on self-regulation and doing things right from the beginning. But that doesn't mean that our competitors will do the same. So as time goes by, there would always be a situation where you're following a disadvantage if you are the one that is taking a stand, correct? We do believe that in the long term is the best strategy to do, but in the short term, it wouldn't. So if you want to have more clarity today, and you're building a service company in digital assets, I think right now Hong Kong is very interesting, correct? Like I actually just came from there, and the dynamics of the country are fantastic. Like all of a sudden there is regulatory clarity, people are moving there, people are building things. I think it's a great place for you to try if you do want to have that regulatory clarity. Then after that, it's actually going to be, in this case, Europe. I think MiCA is very interesting. It regulates stable coins, it regulates service providers, it regulates governance. And the reality is that all of the other jurisdictions are waiting to see if it works. So if it works and it goes well with MiCA in Europe, most probably it will then spin off to the UK and to the US. But the clarity there is not gonna be very big. As a matter of fact, France actually provides a pretty good framework. You know, so I mean, if you don't mind the taxes, go for it. Yeah.
Hi there, I'm from Matrixport. So we launched a RWA tokenization project 3 months ago. And for the moment, we're tokenizing UST bills. And I saw that you're mentioning you do RWA LP farming. Can you expand a little bit on that? And also, what is your view of the RWA tokenization project running on permissionless or permissioned pool.
Yeah.
in DeFi.
I'm very bullish on the idea of real world yields being tokenized into the industry. It's actually extremely interesting. Like the project that we've supported at the moment is called Credix, but I mean, I think if you're tokenizing T-bills, it's something that is very close. As soon as you tokenize something where the yield is paid by somebody else and you can just use tokenization as a way to streamline the payments, you bring a new user that is using the technology for something else. Now, what's interesting is how do you then use the value proposition of digital assets to empower that. And for me, that's going to be programmability and composability. So you build a T-bill, fantastic. Now, the real question is, if it's tokenized and it's composable, it's like a T-bill with superpowers. Right? And that's where I think it becomes super interesting and what we look at. I mean, like, if you look at, again, like what Credix has done with the tokenization of, I would say, South American invoices from farming, now the question is, can you take something like a T-bill or a receipt for payment and all of a sudden use it as collateral to issue stable coins on Maker DAO, correct? And then all of a sudden you start unlocking value, you start unlocking composability, and that's where I think it is the most important element. I mean, if you do all the hard work, which is the regulatory side, to really get the tokenization of the bond on chain, that's where the majority of the tough part is. But actually, the majority of the value is going to come after, which is once it's tokenized and you have something that pays 5%, fantastic, but that something composes to everything else really nicely. And then naturally, the T-bill users have a real reason to go into DeFi because it's more valuable. The same bond is more valuable on DeFi than outside of DeFi, which is the whole point of where we think this is going. Yeah. Okay.
I'm coming. I think it's going to be the last question. And then,
Thank you. So, MiCA regulation doesn't regularize the fully decentralized protocols, right? Do you think this is going to change in the future, and why?
I mean, at some point, it will have to get there, correct? Like, it's a little bit, I think, in my point of view, just trying to decrease complexity. This is a very complex topic. I mean, even if you look at the regulation in MiCA towards the stable coins, which is the closest that it gets to something that touches DeFi, it doesn't actually address algorithmic stable coins. It doesn't at all. So even that, like, it has, according to them, an algorithmic stablecoin then wouldn't be a stablecoin, correct? Because it's not foreseen into the model. So the question is, will it happen? I think it will happen, like, for sure. But if you look at the time that it takes for law to be implemented and roll out, my initial assumption is that towards the following cycle, so like the current cycle that we are in until the closing of any future bull market, we will most probably be on a regulatory cycle where we get regulation of issuers and service providers, but not yet of protocols. I think that's very hard. I mean, if we get to the point where market makers, exchanges, and issuance of assets is regulated, that is already a massive advancement. You know? And I mean, I'll be very surprised if they manage to get past that, honestly. Sure, no problem. There was one more. Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. And my question is, how do you see the future of general privacy in blockchain according to the regulation in different jurisdictions?
General privacy, in what sense?
It could be private voting, it could be private transactions, and so on. So different kind of privacy.
Okay, I mean, so I guess if the question is on towards the good or the bad side of privacy, because indeed, like, there are a lot of projects right now that, as there is more scrutiny, they have gone towards building technology that is harder to check. Right? Like we've gotten in contact by a wide range of protocols which are building the same things that already work in DeFi, but with encryption technology to make it very, very hard to understand what's happening. Correct? Like from full layer ones that are trying to implement privacy technology as their main differentiation factor and enabling people to build, I would say, Monero-like applications as smart contracts. Yeah, so this is happening actually, and they are raising money. they are raising money. So I would assume that it would happen. We've seen exchanges doing the same, correct? Both central limit order book decentralized exchanges and liquidity pool base, where they address it in a way where they want the level of transparency to be equal to a centralized exchange, which means that you should not be able to see what other people are trading. And they assume that if in centralized finance people like that level of privacy, most probably in DeFi that same level of privacy would be appreciated by users. Now I cannot predict if it's going to be a key driver of adoption, to be honest. I mean, I think that the large majority of people don't have anything to hide, and it might not be the main reason for them to change to a different blockchain or change to a different exchange. But from a regulatory perspective, they definitely a lot harder to get adoption. Like even if you look at the most basic examples, which are going to be Monero and Zcash, majority of trading entities like us, take great care on not interacting with customers making use of those already today under the very low current regulation that exists. Because even if there is not yet a strong regulation on best practices, how to issue a stable coin, how to do your governance, that's coming, correct? But the one thing that is already pretty well implemented is AML. So AML regulation is already pretty well implemented. We have to make sure, and we could get a fine if we don't make sure that we're not enabling somebody else to launder money, correct? So I think those kind of applications would always suffer that problem, because even if the rest takes long time to catch, AML is already pretty well implemented, at least in Europe, pretty well implemented.